and welcome to the video. In this video I'm going to be covering the current state of Destiny 2, going over systems and features that need addressing, as well as talking about future predictions and expectations. The four main topics I'm going to be hitting today are armor, guns, miscellaneous, and story content. So first up with armor, the ammo economy. Bungie needs to get rid of all ammo related mods, including reserves, finders, and scavengers. First off, scavengers screw up PvP. Bungie has already stated that they don't like the dominance of special weapons in PvP. If they get rid of scavengers, this does this. And why I'm saying get rid of it is because these systems should already be in the game. Like, the game should just give you ammo. It's not a build to have ammo finders on your helmet. It's not a build to have ammo in your reserves. It's not enough of a benefit to justify taking up the mod capacity or slots. For example, in GM Nightfalls, you are giving up your damage resist mods for reserves. And later, I'll show you an example as to why you don't want to do that. It's just not worth putting in the slots for the ammo stuff. The game should just be giving you enough ammo periodically to fill you up. Or the ammo mods need to be reworked. So something that the Division does for your big special weapon is you have a little bar on the side. Every kill you get fills up that bar. When the bar is filled, the next kill you get will give you ammo. So maybe ammo finders could be reworked into something like that, where it's like, get a void grenade kill and you get special ammo, or get a solar melee kill and you'll get some heavy ammo, or something like that. You know, more interesting gameplay design stuff that you can actually make it build into your build. So like, if you're doing a melee build, you could do that solar melee mod, or if you're doing a grenade build, you could do that void grenade mod, something like that. Not this just random, oh, I might get lucky sort of thing. It costs too much, it takes up too many mod slots. It's just not good right now. The game should just give you ammo. The artifact. This is kind of a in-depth one. So, I don't think the artifact is designed well right now. And most people will complain about champions, but champions aren't the problem. It's the limited weapons that we have each season. So I have a few thoughts about this. One of them is to make the artifact a year-long thing. So basically what you would do is every season that we have, you would just stack that on the end of last season's artifact. And maybe they could do something where it's like, by the end of the season, whatever mods you had on the previous artifact get locked in place, and then you always have access to those mods for the rest of the year. This would sort of make a year-long progression, and it would also create this, like, sense of importance and, oh, okay, I need to make sure I have this mod going into next season, because you don't know what you're going to have next season. Another thought I've had is that instead of doing that all year sort of style of artifact, you just make all the mods on each season's artifact always active once you unlock it. This makes sense in the design philosophy of having a limited amount of mods you can have on the artifact, because if you limit the amount of mods on the artifact, then you're saying, like, okay, you can't have these two mods because they're too strong together. But in the real sense of the game, you're already limiting those mods by the cost of putting them on your armor. So, like, you can't put a 9 cost mod and a 6 cost mod on the same piece of armor. So they're already limited in that fashion. So I'm saying just make them active once you have them unlocked. That makes sense why we can only put 12 mods on our artifact. And then my third idea is basically remove that limit, but make it to where the only limiting factor of the mods is the cost to slot them on your armor. That's simple, you know? Like, once I get plus 13 power or whatever it may be, I can have a 13th mod unlocked. It doesn't make sense right now to reset the mod. Like, there's 3 bad features. It's the limited amount of mods you can have unlocked, it's the resetting of the artifact, and then it's the limited weapons that we have each season for the champions. I think any of those 3 suggestions I just put out would fix any of those problems. The current build mods, I sort of touched on this about how the ammo mods aren't really part of builds in my eyes. I'm talking about Elemental Wells, Charged with Light, and Warmind Cells. These are all pretty good, but like Elemental Wells, they shouldn't have been, the first set of elemental well mods should not have been released without stasis weapons, because these are functionally not useful with stasis, because stasis doesn't, like, the grenades don't do enough damage to kill enemies, so you can't make elemental wells. Elemental wells should be active in PvP. They're not. Charged with Light is the only build mod that's currently available in PvP. Warmind cells do work in PvP, because they work in Gambit. If you create a Warmind cell, you can kill a player that's near it, or they can kill you that's near it. It's kind of funny. Yeah, we need to have these builds like more present in the rest of the game. Like, if I want to put together an elemental well mod, it should work in PvP. Or at the least, it should say on the mods that they don't work in the Crucible. What I'm getting at is basically, if it says it does something, it should do that, period. But where's this whole no separated sandboxes for builds? People keep wanting separate sandboxes, but like Bungie's like, no, we want the game to function the same in both areas, but not for the armor builds, apparently. Those are just my two thoughts on them. I think those mods should work in PvP. They should be adjusted some way to work in PvP. I think it'd be a lot more interesting to see people actually having builds in an MMO in PvP. We need more control over armor stats. Now, Master VoG is a good start because what it does is each week there is going to be a skew that the armors take towards a certain stat. Now, that's a good start. But the problem here is that it's still relying on the game to just give you a good piece of armor. There needs to be some sort of player input to controlling our armor. Maybe we can get like different tokens for our stats, and then we use them to change the distribution. And maybe we can like upgrade our armor, give every armor like a maximum stat capacity, and we spend like ascendant shards to increase the maximum stat roll, and we can use the stat tokens to change the distribution. That's just the thought off my head. We need some way of player input into our armor stats, or stats need to be changed in a way that benefits less than 10 points into that stat. That topic leads me into Master VoG. It's a high power level, very difficult activity. It has superfluous rewards. And what I mean by that is that you only get the time lost weapon from the challenge mode, from actually completing the challenge. Now, I'm actually a fan of this. I think it's cool. I think that's something that makes it really obvious where you get that weapon from, and it means that you had to accomplish X task, and the X task is not trivial. My problem with it currently is that the other incentive from Master VoG, like I just mentioned, is the distributed stat rolls on your armor. So I think they need to make it so that no weapons drop outside of the time lost weapon in the challenge mode, or make it to where you always get an armor drop, because you should be going into Master VoG for 2 reasons. Well, 3 reasons. You know, triumphs, badge collection, stuff like that. That's one of the reasons. Time lost weapon, that's the other reason. And then getting armor stat rolls is the third reason. That third reason kind of falls when you can get a regular weapon as a drop from Master VoG. Either they should make it to where every non-time lost drop is armor, so you're at least always getting some armor from it, or they need to make it to where along with your normal drop that you would normally be getting, you always get a piece of armor along with that. This would also kind of increase the incentive to play Master, because a lot of people have been saying like, oh, it's not really worth it, and I kind of see that in the sense that like, yeah, you're just getting kind of stat tiered armor and the one time lost weapon. I get that, but the thing is like, that's because stats aren't very valuable right now. So that's another thing that they need to look into, and I can go into that in further detail later in here. But yeah, either drop an extra armor piece or just make all the drops armor, basically, for Master VoG, and that would get my seal of approval. Raid mods. These are mods that were changed with Beyond Light, and they changed them to where raid armor has an additional slot that you can only slot raid mods on. Now, it's cool from the Deepstone Crypt because the arc mods can proc the like Charged with Light arc mods to get their passives, because that's the only reason people use those Charged with Light mods. Like, it's super obvious that's why people do it. But most are boring. They should just be generic orb generation versus whatever raid faction they're from. So like Deepstone Crypt, when you fully masterwork the chess piece and it's void, getting precision kills on Fallen has a chance to crit an orb. That's all it should be. Just be generic free bonus from masterworking the armor and based on the element. So like the sort of idea that Bungie has for the elements is that Solar is for grenades, Void is for class ability or precision based on the VoG VoG mods. And then Solar is for grenade, and then Arc is for melee. So that's kind of what Bungie has set in the game. So make it to where when you masterwork the raid armor, you just, that 5th mod slot, it just puts a free no-cost mod on there for like generating orbs. I think the ones from Vault of Glass are a good idea, but the fact that they're limited to the raid and only the raid sort of diminishes their effect, because like, I mean, I've cleared Master VoG and like, sure, some of them helped, maybe, but like, you know, you don't really feel the effect really, because they're so specific. Like, the only good one is like, you have to be standing near a sync plate or a conflux, and then hitting a high-level enemy can debuff them. It's like, it's too specific, it costs too much mod capacity, it has to be on the specific element of the armor, and we didn't really feel that big of a benefit from it. And then sometimes you don't even know what they're doing. And then, for the Vault of Glass mod specifically, there's all these ones for generating orbs. Nobody's using those, because there's a better one that can add a debuff to an enemy. So it's like, there's only one mod that's really useful, so you're never going to use the other ones. And this brings me into my next topic, armor elements. They're kind of pointless now that majority of the mods are neutral. Now, like I said in the raid mods part, if they could give us some sort of passive benefit for masterworking based on your element, maybe they could bring back the damage resist, because damage resist is actually more of an important thing for the GMs now. Like, maybe it's like 5% damage resist per element that you have on your armor. Like, that, what it used to be, in combination with the damage resist mods. So, like, if you wanted to get, like, say you had 5 void pieces of armor, then you masterwork all of them. That's a 25% damage resist to void. Then you could throw on a void resist on your chest piece and a concussive resist. You'd have a 40% void resist and a 25% concussive resist. And that would be pretty cool. That would we need more things that increase our survivability. Because, as I said before, I'm going to show you an example right after this topic as to why you need to run your damage resist mods and why stats are kind of pointless. As I just said, I'm going to talk about stats here. They're not very impactful. They need to be reworked in some way. I am going to put up on screen a picture of resistance versus damage resist mods. This was taken from a Vandal and a Grandmaster. I did not do this. Someone from Reddit did it, so I'll try to link their name in the video to give them credit. But this goes to show that, like, resistance is a useless stat. And this is just kind of like a system of the larger, a problem of the larger system at play. Like, the stats are not that useful. Like, recovery is, it's pretty good, but it's like, it's pretty ironic, because on a Warlock, if you're running a Healing Rift, once you have enough cooldown on that Healing Rift, you don't need recovery, because standing in the Healing Rift functionally is 100% recovery. And it goes for your entire team. So it's like, you're not really getting any benefit out of that personally. Like, you're using that stat just to cool down your Rift, which then gives you 100 recovery. Like, I only run 50 recovery in most things. That's my Warlock. And then resistance, like, as I said, the picture should be on the screen. It's so abysmally depressing how much resistance you would need compared to damage resist mods. Compared to 2 mods that cost 1 capacity each. Like, it's just, the stats need to be reworked. My suggestion is mobility, you make it affect sprint speed, and that would basically be good. Leave it at its current stats and stuff like that, like the percentages. Resistance, max resistance should be like a 50% damage reduction. Like, it should be, you should be a tank when you have this. When you spec into resistance, you should literally be a tank. Recovery, leave it as is. It's actually kind of fine. And then the cooldown stats. what I would like to see with intellect, I think grenade and melee are the same, could remain the same. But like intellect, I think what they should do is make it so that the intellect stat no longer affects your passive regen speed. Rather, it increases how much you get per kill. This would actually fix PvP in a little bit, because this would disable people from just passively sitting around corners being like, oh, we're charging our super, we're going to get the win button next round. It's going to make people to where they actually have to fight. And what they could do with this is make it to where if you have tier 10 intellect, you could get a ton out of a kill. And then this also sort of just reinforces builds in a similar way, because now if you have tier 10 intellect and you also have a thresh weapon, you're breaking that tier 10 cap. And this is the only way to break that cap in some respects. Stuff like energy converter and stuff like that, sure. But, you know, that's the idea, is that you're not regenning super pass. Everyone has the same passive regen. It's just when you get kills, you get more super. So those are my thoughts on stats. Moving on to the next topic. This is the final topic for armor, and this is going to be about Legend, Master, Lost Sectors. I think the current system, I think they were good when they were implemented, but the problem starts to arise when you start farming them. When you can go through a Legend or Master Lost Sector and get nothing as a reward, that's really disincentivizing players to do this sort of content. Like, first off, it's a low chance of getting the exotic that you want, because you have to fight the chance of getting the exotic, which in a Legend was estimated to be about 25% of the time you're getting an exotic from those. Master, you're getting it about 30% of the time. But I'm going to talk about Master at the end of this topic. So you're fighting that 25% chance of actually getting the exotic. Then you're fighting what exotic in that slot you're going to get. Now it's good, we know what slot it's going to be in if you do get it. But every class has like 3 to 4 exotics in every slot. So it's like, okay, 25% chance to get an exotic. And then let's say another 25% chance of getting the piece you want in that slot. And then it's like, there's 6 stats you gotta deal with. So then, what, based on how many ever stats you want, you probably want like 2 of them to be, you know, spiky. So let's say 2 out of 6 on that. So 1/3 chance that you actually get the armor you want, the stat and the armor exotic you want. That's ridiculous. That's too many layers of RNG. Like, it's just not, it's not worth it. Like, once you get the new exotic for the season, I typically stop farming it because, like, I know I'm probably not going to get the stat I want. And now they can drop from Nightfalls and other exotic sources, so that's good. So, basically, my suggestion would be that we have 4 of these Legend and Master Lost Sectors available constantly. 1 for each slot of exotic piece. Half of them would be Legend, half would be Master. They would always drop an exotic from that slot. Master, the reason you would want to go do Master is that it would drop a higher stat roll. So like, Legend, let's say it's dropping around like 60 to 65, and that 65 is like a rare thing to find. Then Master, you're dropping around 65 to 70s. I think that would be an incentive to go do it. But the thing is, you're always getting it. Because the problem with Masters right now is they're not worth that 5% bump in chance of getting an exotic. The difficulty and time it takes, it's not that they're like super difficult and I'm asking for them to be nerfed. I'm saying that they should be equal rewards based on like how much effort you have to put in. Because you're not putting in only 5% more effort. You're putting in like 50% more effort to do the Master, because you're having to solo them and stuff like that. You know, it's just not worth it right now. So I think there should be 4 active, half Legend, half Master, always drop an exotic. Legend has a lower stat total, Master has a higher stat total. Then you could actually farm for the exotic you wanted. Alright, so that's the end of my armor sort of discussion. I'm going to be moving into the guns. I still have the miscellaneous and the story stuff to go. With the introduction of Hawkmoon into Destiny 2, we saw that Bungie was able to create randomly rolled exotic primaries. Now, a lot of people do not like this, but I think that those people don't understand why they don't like it. I think what it is they see it as this thing that it's like, oh, I have to get the god roll, so I have to go farm for the god roll. That's wrong, because the non-random rolled version of the weapons are basically the set way, the standard weapon. Like, all the random rolled perks, yeah, they're good, but it's not like, none of them are changing how you're using that gun. The core of that gun is the exotic perk. And this needs to be expanded on almost every exotic primary. There are tons of exotic primaries that people just don't like using. And exotic primaries are hard to constitute using. Because it's like, I could either use Xenophage as a DPS king in a GM or a raid, or I could use, like, Bad Juju, where I'm going to get a little bit more super, and I can't even kill an ad with, like, the full magazine in a GM. That's a problem. And Bad Juju is a great example of this, because this would be a great weapon to turn into a random rolled exotic. Look at Bad Juju right now. Has Hipfire Grip in the 3rd slot. Now, most exotics will have some generic perk in that slot. Like, Anarchy has Moving Target. Like, I don't even know if that works on Anarchy, for all we know. I'm not talking about giving Anarchy random rolls, but I'm just using that as an example to show that most exotics have this, like, sort of generic perk in that 3rd column. Now, the ones that don't have a generic perk, they probably split the exotic perk into two for technical reasons, so maybe let's exclude those for this discussion. So, looking back at Bad Juju, imagine if you could get Thresh in that 3rd perk. You would have Thresh and the Bad Juju exotic perk. So think of the super regen. That would be crazy. Think if you could get Rampage in that perk. Then that again synergizes with the exotic perk. Kill Clip, same thing. Rapid Hit, same thing. That would actually be really cool, Rapid Hit, because you're getting those rounds refunded, so you're benefiting from the reload and the, like, handling and stuff like that. You know, these are just 3 examples that make Bad Juju a lot better of a gun. And the problem right now is, like, it's set with Hipfire Grip. There's nothing I can do about that. It's really hard for me to, like, tell someone to use an exotic primary in something like a GM or even a Master VoG, where these are the places that you should be wanting to use them. Or in PvP, but PvP is dominated by special weapons. So there's that problem. But the main problem here is exotic primaries need something to get them over the bump of not being used. Maybe add more intrinsic anti-barriers or something like that. I think random rolled exotics would help a lot with this, but they're just not in a good spot, and everybody knows it. Bungie knows it. They've admitted that they know it. This is my thought how you would get them to be made better. I'm going to stop ranting about random rolled exotic primaries now to move on to the next topic. Elemental primaries. Now, we already have elemental primaries in Destiny 2. What I'm talking about is the D1 style, where, like, your primaries were always in the 1st slot. So let's say 1st slot primary elements. Because Cryosthesia kind of broke the current Destiny 2 design with the elements, and shows that Bungie doesn't need to follow that set design. There could be a return to D1 style elements. Adding Stasis will not jive with the standard 3 players formula, for one for each element design. Thus, primaries will be where the darkness elements weapons go. Sorry, kinetics. That's my prediction, basically, is that I think the darkness elemental weapons are going to go in the kinetic slot. Cryosthesia sets the groundwork to do that, basically. Now, this could just be an exotic, and I could just be reading into this where I probably shouldn't be. But that's what I think is going to happen. And, you know, by this time, we're not going to see a return to the D1 design where primaries are in the 1st slot, specials are in the 2nd, heavies are in the heavy slot. I know we're not going back to that. I'm not asking to go back to that, honestly. I think in some situations it would be easier to design the game with that design. And currently, like, I don't know, that sort of design in D2 doesn't really, like, there's no benefit really right now. This is basically my prediction. We're going to see a lot more triple element loadouts with weapons. Maybe they're only going to be in exotics in those slots, but that's just my thought. So moving on to the next topic, which ties in pretty heavily with this. Stasis weapons. How are these going to work? Most likely, they'll be functionally similar to current Arc, Void, and Solar. As mentioned before, might only be the first slot along with other Darkness weapons. But the real question here is, will they have status effects? And what a status effect is, basically, when you're shooting something, something happens to that enemy other than damage. So like, with stasis weapons, perhaps they're going to be able to slow enemies or something like that. Maybe precision hits do a stasis explosion and does an AoE damage. Now, the real question here is, will these be intrinsic to stasis weapons? Will they exist at all, even if, you know? And then, do I need perks for them to do something with stasis? Because my philosophy and view on it is that if I need a perk on my stasis weapon to do it, they're not adding status effects into the game through weapons. They're just adding a new perk that only happens to roll on stasis weapons. That's how I would view that. For it to be a status effect, it needs to be intrinsic to the fact that it is a stasis weapon. So like, I could roll, every roll of this weapon X that's stasis will always freeze on hit, or not freeze, but slow or something like that. Apply one stack of slow. Something, you know, something like that. I don't know what we would want out of stasis weapons for them to actually have a status effect. Maybe what I just described, like adding stacks of slow every hit or something like that. Yes, PvP, it would be really different, but I think we know that Bungie's kind of alright with PvP going a little different. I am as well. I think it's, you know, I think people need to pull the rods out of their asses when it comes to, like, PvP needs to be balanced. I don't think, you know, PvP has never been, will never be, and can never be balanced in Destiny if you want it to be a fun game. Don't y'all remember year 1 double primaries team shooting with Mida? Like, that was really enjoyable. That's the question, though. How will stasis weapons, and in the future, how will presumably the Hive magic, and then whatever we get for Lightfall, how are those going to function? I think they might all be relegated to the kinetic slot, like I said before, and again in this topic. I think maybe the Hive weapons will all function like Thorn, so that we're going to have to get like dot weapons maybe. And maybe that kind of goes hand in hand with them nerfing Anarchy. You know, if stasis weapons can freeze an enemy, that's a really good status effect, because it inherently gives your special and heavy weapons more damage when they're frozen. So, depending on how these function, maybe they can function like the gun Malfeasance from Gambit. If multiple people are shooting the same target with Malfeasance, it's the number of bombs on that target that determines the explosion. So maybe if 4 people are shooting an enemy with stasis guns, it'll freeze much more frequently, making like your heavy weapon do a lot more damage. You know, that could be a really good strat for PvE content, like raids and stuff. But those are my thoughts about stasis weapons. Moving on to the next topic. Fusion rifles. They're not in a good state. Like, they're just not good. One of the things I've been recently thinking about why fusions are not good is because whereas slug shotguns, regular shotguns, snipers, all these weapons can benefit from precision hits. Fusions cannot do that. So, what's the solution to fixing fusions then? I think just giving them a shit ton of damage. I think that's the only thing you can really do. They've shown that this season, they've added some unique perks to fusions. They're just not that good. Like Kickstart, you gotta be sprinting, then you gotta slide and shoot in during the slide to get increased damage. Like, what is this? And then it's on cooldown after that. It's not like it doesn't have a cooldown. It has a cooldown. Like, you gotta do all that to get a damage bonus on a fusion. Like, what is this? It's just, why would I use a fusion over a shotgun or a sniper? I want to use fusions. I've been using them recently. I want to use them. They're terrible in PvP, because you have to use basically the high impact fusion. And this long charge time, people just shotgun rush you. So, they're terrible in PvP. PvE, they're alright, but it's just like, they're kind of abysmal damage. I think the problem with fusions is that Bungie's trying to think of them as being a rifle. Like, they do have a long range, but they should be thought of being like a charged between a shotgun and a sniper, which is exactly where they should be. And the fusions can't benefit from precision damage, so they need to, I think the only solution is just have a ton of damage. Like, who cares if there's a season where fusions are meta? Like, is that really going to hurt the game, per se? Like, that's only going to benefit the game. Who cares if there are broken over snipers or shotguns? Like, oh no, fusions are good. Like, we're all gonna run and hide because fusions are good. Like, I don't know. Either the perks teams need to give it some new, better perks, because the current new perks that they added this season are not doing it for fusions. They're not that special. And then they nerfed the one that makes it explode. Sorry, I can't remember the perk name. But they gave it a 30% mag size bump, which de-incentivizes you from using the function of that perk. So, fusions are just kind of in a bad spot. I don't know if Bungie even sees what the problem is with fusions, but nobody's using them. They're not fun to use, and they're not good to use, frankly. Weapons 3.0. This idea has been talked about a little bit with, like, Armor 2.0. I think the general idea of this concept is that people want to basically build craft their weapons. Now, this will kind of go into the next topic I'm talking about, which will be the vault and collections. But I think the problem with weapons right now is that you can get a weapon. Like, okay, the Crucible, Gambit, and Strike weapons. These weapons have 12 perks in each of those last two columns. Are you kidding me? That's a 1 in 144 chance of getting those two combinations that you want. Now, look, I get the design of that. The point of that is that when you do get that god roll of that weapon, you're going to feel euphoric, basically, because, like, you got the weapon that very few will ever get. But the problem with that is that's only the last two perks. Then you have the magazine and the barrel, or whatever the first column will be for whatever weapon you're getting. Like, that makes that 144 go to, like, a couple thousand, I believe. Haven't checked how many perks are in each of those columns, but it's not going to be a small number. I think what people are wanting with, like, a Weapons 3.0 is, like, some sort of, like, crafting. Like, we have the gunsmith, we have the forges. You know, there's lore ways to implement the idea of, like, us crafting weapons. You know, we had Arms Day in D1. That was a cool thing. It was also a weekly sort of ritual thing. You got on every Wednesday, saw what your new weapon rolls were, and, you know, you picked up a new set of weapon rolls. And then what it also did was gave you something to do throughout the week. Kind of like factions. It's just kind of like a passive thing that you could work on while you're doing your other stuff. If there were to be weapon crafting, I think it needs to be tied into the collections very heavily. I think it should also be expensive. I think it should be this sort of, like, in-game thing that you're doing. Not this thing where it's like, you know, I just started Destiny, I got a free account, I'm gonna go craft the god roll weapon and go turn my hacks on in Trials. No, it shouldn't be that. It should be this thing that, like, you have to progress throughout the season. Like, let's say you start with a white weapon at the beginning of every season. You get to choose, like, one of 3 weapons each season per character, for example. I don't know. This is just an example. I'm thinking of it right now on the top of my head. When you get that white weapon, you gotta get some kills with it first. You know, getting it to be blue is the easy steps. You know, the lower levels are easy. You know, you do some quest that's assigned on that weapon, kind of like the Solstice armor, where it tells you, like, little tasks you gotta do. So, like, maybe an auto rifle, you gotta get, like, a couple rapid multi-kills and get some precision kills and generate some orbs or something like that. I don't know. Let's say it can generate orbs for this sake of argument. Then it goes up to blue. Then blue, you gotta, like, complete, like, I don't know, 10 strikes or 10 Crucible games or something like that. You gotta get, like, 3 Crucible kills or, you know, something like that. Then you get up to purple, again, something like that. Or you get up to green, sorry. Purple's after green, you know, just doing this. Purple is where it's gonna start being difficult, you know. It's like, complete a raid without taking this weapon off or something like that. That would be interesting. You know, that would be pretty cool. That's forcing you to change your loadout, and it's like you're doing this sort of in-game thing. And then at the end of purple, maybe you have to spend some, like, Ascendant shards to get it up to, like, masterwork it or something. But then masterworking it, and every time you're doing these levels, you're choosing a perk in the column or something. So, like, you're taking it to the gunsmith at the end of each of the quests. So like for white, you're choosing the first column perk that you want. For blue, you're choosing the second column. Green, third column, and purple is the fourth column. I think the idea should be a little bit harder to get that fourth column than what I had just described, just doing a raid with it, like never dequipping it during a raid. I think that's a little too easy. I think it should be something difficult, like go solo Shattered Throne or something, and you can get that fourth column. And the reason I'm saying this to be difficult is because it should be this thing where people are like, oh man, you got the season 15 auto rifle up to purple. Man, that's pretty good. You went and soloed, Pit of Heresy or whatever, Shattered Throne. I think that's sort of a cool thing. I think that's cool what they're doing with like the time lost weapons. Like, you see when someone has that equipped, you know exactly what they had to do, and you know it is not easy. That should be the thought for these seasonal weapons, is that getting that fourth perk, making it purple, getting all the perks on there, it's not an easy process. But you respect them for doing it. So now I'm going to be covering the miscellaneous sort of things. This is the last topic for gameplay topics. Then I'm going to be moving on to story stuff. There's very few story stuff I want to mention. I'm not that big into the story. I think it's good, but I'll let you figure out what I'm talking about when you hear it at the end of the video. Alright, so like I said, that the previous topic, this is going to tie into Vault and Collections. These need to be combined and done something with. The Vault, it's just getting ridiculous. This is going to tie into the next topic, how we just keep getting more and more things, you know. I'm a collector type of person. I want to have the god roll of every sort of weapon, but recently I've just been sort of like getting at that 499 out of 500. I've just been looking at the seasonal weapons like, man, I don't have the room to want you. I would love to go get them, but I just can't. They're not worth the vault space. I gotta get me some vaulted glass weapon rolls, folks. Like, I can't be wasting my vault space on seasonal weapons. Like, I don't care what people say, how good they are. I don't enjoy them. I think the grind to get them and the grind to get a god roll is ridiculous for those weapons. It's so much easier, ironically, if I just do the raid and get some rolls on those. It's much more enjoyable to do it that way. But the way you can tie Vault and Collections in together, it's very, very simple. When you get a weapon, you can infuse it into your collections. What this does is it takes all the perks that were on that weapon, so your magazine, your barrel, your last two column perks, your third and fourth column active perks. It takes those, it destroys the weapon, it infuses it into the collection system. Now when you go inspect that weapon in the collections, you see those perks in that field. You keep doing this until you have every single perk collected on that weapon, and only then can you go into your collections and pull out a specific version of that weapon you want. You go and select the nodes of the perks you want, it pulls out at the current like under power level or whatever things are dropping out of your collections, and it has those perks. This solves vault space almost instantly. I think it's crazy they have not done anything with collections as of right now. This might be the thing we see with Witch Queen. Either this or like a Weapons 3.0 or some sort of like elemental status effects or something like that. I think those are very likely candidates we'll see for Witch Queen. But the vault space is getting ridiculous. And you can't just keep increasing vault space because that results in more databases. They need to come up with a smarter solution that solves the problem before it's a problem. It's already a problem though. But like, if you integrate the collections into the vault space, then you never have to deal with this problem. And this also allows them to do more random rolled exotic primaries, because that's another problem with it. Random rolled exotic primaries is that I want to have multiple different versions of this exotic primary, but every time I do that will take up a vault space. And personally, for me, I try not to store exotic weapons in my vault. I'll just delete them because I can pull them out whenever I need them. I only keep the like really important ones like Anarchy and stuff like that when Witherhoard up to power each season, because I know those are going to be useful in stuff like this, in stuff like Master VoG, for example, or GMs. A simple way of doing this, again, you take the weapon, infuse it in your collections, adds those perks to the weapon collection that you have, and only once you've collected all the perks can you pull out a specific weapon. And the reason I'm saying only once you've collected all the perks is this sort of plays devil advocate for Bungie. You know, their goals, they want players to increase their playtime. This does that. People that want to collect weapons, they got to go farm every roll for that weapon. This also rewards people for getting bad rolls. Instead of just deleting it, like most people do, or using it for infusion material, you can add it to your collection. No hurt, no foul. Like, it doesn't hurt you. You only benefit from getting bad rolls now. Now, every single roll you get, it's a benefit. You could be like, oh man, you know, I need like osmosis roll. I don't like that osmosis roll, but I need it for my collections, so I can keep it in my collections forever and have it stored. This would also create sort of like a seasonal sort of like mini game you're having to play. Like, okay, it's easiest right now in this season to get these weapons. So I'm going to try to get this weapon 100%ed in my collections this season, because this is the weapon I really like for the future. So I'm going to store all the rolls in there. Bam. Got it for every future season. Progression. And as I said, this topic, again, that one fed into this one. More weapons does not equal good weapons. This kind of goes back into the vault space. You know, it's like, since collections don't have something like I just mentioned, we just keep getting new things, more things. It's getting ridiculous. I can't store it all. Like, I don't want to store it all. It's just crazy. Like, I've had to purge my vault a couple times, and that's because of, like, I'm storing exotics that might be reworked because they're so bad, but they have pretty good rolls on them. I went and purged a lot of my exotics that were under, like, say, 66 stat total. I have to just come up with some arbitrary reason to delete a bunch of things because of the vault space. So, the random rolled exotics, that's not helping with vault space either. But more things is not necessarily a good thing. Everyone keeps asking that, oh, the game should be showering me in loot. It's a mathematical fallacy. If the game is showering you in loot, then none of that loot matters. Like, I would rather a few, like 3 weapons from the season, like seasonal weapons, but every single one of those weapons would be great rolls. They would have a wonderful roll. Like, I don't know, an auto rifle with like explosive rounds or something. That would be crazy. Or like a hand cannon that has an explosive and time payload rounds. That would be cooler on an auto rifle, but I don't think the game could handle 6 people or 12 people shooting that sort of auto rifle. And I think that's why we've never gotten something like that. But that would be crazy. I want stuff like that. I want fewer weapons that are more impactful. Because the simple math is, when you have a lot of things, each one of those is going to be valued a lot less relative to the rest of the group. Because you just simply have more. It's simple inflation, really. Like, if you think about it from an economic standpoint, like, that's all it is like, you have a lot of weapons, therefore each individual weapon is valued less. Because you have many more alternatives. So, seasons need to stop giving us, like 6 weapons. We need, like, a few. I get people would, the problem here is that, from the outside looking in, people look at that and they're like, oh, am I going to get the new season? It's like, oh, there's only 3 weapons? Oh, what am I doing? But then the people playing the game, they're like, oh, you know, there's only 3 weapons, but each one has a great roll, and they're really fun and unique, and they've never made these weapons before. So those are my thoughts on, like, seasonal weapons. They need to give us less, because that makes each weapon more valuable. Are we going to get any more dungeons? You know, like, we haven't got a dungeon since Prophecy. I mean, there's so much opportunity. You know, we could go through the Vex portal in Glassway. We could do something on the Braytech facility. That would be cool. We could do something in the Clovis, like, the simulation world. That would be an easy one. They don't even have to, like, that's simple. Like, you don't even have to, like, have a reason why we're doing that. It's like, here's a test. It's a dungeon. Good luck. It's like, okay, dude, you got it, man. I think the coolest one would be Glassway. A Splicer dungeon. That would be cool. I doubt we're getting it because it's seasonal content. Who knows? Might be getting it. All I know is we haven't got a dungeon in a long time, and I've been wanting a dungeon for a long time. I'm getting kind of sick of Pit of Heresy, Shattered Throne, and Prophecy. Prophecy got old real fast because it just has reissued loot. You know, that's another thing. Dungeons, they need to have their own loot drops. You know, Shatterthrone kind of had this for a little bit when they didn't have all the weapons brought back, but now they are, so Shatterthrone's a little less. You know, same with Pit, but we need a new dungeon. When are we getting a new dungeon? We got 2 raids, that's good, but can we get at least 1 dungeon every year? That's something I would really like to see. This next season will be the final season, presumably, that we're getting Stasis, Aspects, and Fragments. My expectation for Warlock, I cannot make a prediction for the other 2 classes because, you know, at this point it kind of seems like they've kind of filled out their necessity aspects, like the aspects that they needed to have. Like the Hunter needed to have Shatter Dive. The Titan needs to have that melee thing where they create stasis crystals. I think those are like sort of their like some core designs for those classes. Warlock got its turret. That's probably like one of the core designs for that. But Warlock still needs something to shatter stasis crystals, and since Shatter Dive and the Slide are both shattering stasis crystals and mobility, I think it's only right that Warlock gets some sort of mobility. And, you know, Warlock is one of... it has the fewest mobility options in the game as a class, as a whole. It only has Icarus Dash and then Blink, which Blink is like a handicap, and you have to be using that exotic, and even then, using Blink means you're giving up your other jump. So, like, I don't want to get into that right now, but it needs to be some sort of mobility and shattering of stasis crystals. If it's not that, I mean, what it probably will be is just shattering stasis crystals. I don't think they're going to give Warlocks any mobility options. We'll see what it is. I'm predicting a stasis shatter. If it's not a stasis shatter, that's going to be really depressing, because Warlocks will be the only class that cannot shatter stasis crystals outside of Super. The Destiny content vault and the state of removing old content. Still don't like it. It's not good. Like, there's no reason to remove old content. I don't care what they say about the games getting too big. It was never that big. I have plenty of other MMOs on my hard drive that are much bigger than Destiny. And you know why? It's because it builds up a library of content for new players to experience. This thing about the Crow having 2 different stories, Uldren and the Crow. People have played a video game before. People coming into Destiny are not going to be like, huh, why are there 2 stories? It's like most people are going to come in and realizing that they're behind and that they need to do some catch up for the story if they want to know about the story. But removing it outright removes the ability for them to do that. The reason like MMOs don't delete content typically is because it builds up a library of things to do. Who cares if the story is inconsistent? You can look up individually how you're supposed to play the story, like what direction you're supposed to go. There's just no reason to remove it. Personally, what this tells me is that Bungie does not think that their game deserves taking up that much space on your hard drive. What it looks like to me, the reason they don't want the game to be a large file size, if that's actually their reason, I have reasons to believe that's not the reason. I think that's just something they came up with because they were told they had to remove stuff. I think the reason is because they want the whole model of the game is based on getting new players in, buying something for a week, and stop playing the game forever. Like, it's a microtransaction game environment. That's the whole point. So when a new player sees, man, that game's 100 gigs, I'm not downloading that. I've never played Destiny, I'm not going to. I think that's what Bungie is trying to get away from. But I just think that's like, if that is what they're thinking, I think that's flawed logic. I think that's really flawed. I think they need to have a robust library of content. Imagine if we had all the stuff that they removed. You would have Scourge of the Past, Crown of Sorrows, Leviathan, the 2 raid layers from Leviathan. You would have Black Armory Forges. You would have Menagerie. You would have the Vex Offensive on the Moon. And then also the activity where like you go into the Black Garden. By the way, there's only one way to get in the Black Garden now. So that's kind of like a world building thing that they got rid of. Was like they had this passive piece of content that showed you more of the universe. You would have all the planets that they got rid of. You know, whatever. That's a little more fair. They had to rework how the systems work. like the engine and stuff like that. So, you know, I can be less harsh on that. But the thing is like, if they build up a robust library, Destiny would be one of the better games, one of the best games in the world. Like, it is a really good game right now, but it's the fact that everything is, like, going to eventually go away that makes it terrible. Like, are we only going to ever have X number of raids? Like, we're only allowed to have 3 raids in the game at a time. Then they're gonna delete the last one, the oldest one. Like, what's the point in that? It should be a robust system. They should utilize it. Or, if they were actually going to do what they said with the DCV, we should have events where they bring back old content for a month. Imagine if, like, Scourge of the Past was back for a month. I mentioned that one because that was my favorite raid from D2. That would be awesome. You could get the Scourge of the Past weapons and armor at the new power level. Stuff like that. You could get Ascendant Shards. You could get the ornaments. You know, whatever. You could get the shaders. This would be a way to reintroduce old content. It'd be a cool event. That'd be much better than Guardian games. I can tell you that much. One more topic. I was just about to end this recording, but then I just started thinking about it, and it's Transmog. Transmog needs to be this thing that overlays on top of our armor. The current system is we turn it into an ornament, and then we apply that ornament to the armor piece individually. But then what happens when you get a new armor piece? Okay, I gotta go back in the UI, gotta select the old ornament, gotta select the old shader, and then I gotta, you know, thumb through 12 pages of shaders on my armor to get the shader that I wanted, because there's no favorite system yet. They said they're working on something like that, but it's probably not gonna be here for a while. Transmog should be an overlay. Exotics would override whatever slot they're in. It's pretty simple. There would be a couple presets. Select 1, preset 1, you look like that appearance. Preset 3, you look like that appearance. Overlays on top of your armor, not the other way around. This is the last miscellaneous topic I have, and it's about Crucible and Gambit. They have not got new maps since the end of the Shadowkeep year. This is a little ridiculous and kind of questionable. You know, we got like 3 strikes, so that's like the PvE version. We should have got like 3 Crucible maps one season, and we should have got 3 Gambit maps one season. Gambit specifically, it feels like Bungie is just like wanting it to die. I don't know what they want to do with Gambit. I don't think they have a clear vision of what they want to do for Gambit. I think the idea behind Crucible not getting new maps is that they added Stasis, so that's going to change up how people are playing the game. But I think like 1 map here and there. Like, we haven't got new game modes for a while. However, they did rework all the rotated game modes. So like Momentum Control, Team Scorched, stuff like that. They reworked that. Team Scorched specifically got a really good rework. Now you can like use the rocket to like project yourself and stuff. Like bounce yourself around. So that's pretty fun. But no new maps. No new game modes for either of them. Where's Rift? Where's anything for Gambit? You go into the Gambit node. Why is there even a Gambit node? It's to house Gambit and custom Gambit. Like, there's no special version of Gambit. There needs to be some like Trials of the 9 Gambit version or something. I think that should come back because like the Trials of the 9 people, they're so cool for the lore. And the guns and armor, it looks so cool. It's an easy way to reintroduce old content, old armor and stuff, old weapons. It's such an easy thing to do. The new Gambit from Beyond Light, that when they got rid of Gambit Prime, took the worst features from Classic Gambit and Gambit Prime and put them together. Boss melting is the dumbest thing in Gambit. As soon as a team gets to the boss, they win. There's no comebacks in the new Gambit. You can't have it. The only time there might be a comeback is when the meatball is a boss, because guess what? That boss, gasp, has mechanics. Who could imagine? And it has health gating mechanics that stop you from dealing damage to it. Immunity phases. Who would imagine that that's bad design? I don't know. It's like they had that in Gambit Prime working in the game. And it was perfectly functional and fine. Rift? Where's Rift at? Like, this is a game mode people have been wanting since D1. Why did they get rid of Rift in the first place? It's such a good game mode. Like, you get double points for doing a backflip into the enemy base. It's just capture the flag. Like, literally, if they had introduced Rift, this season, no one would be caring about there not being new maps, because now they can experience the old maps in a new way. It's pretty simple. Look, I'm not saying it's easy to implement any of this stuff. I'm just saying, like, they haven't done a thing for these two game modes. It's like they want them to, like, it's like they want the player base to stop playing these things. Gambit especially. Like, it's so sad what has happened to Gambit. Gambit used to be really cool. Gambit Prime was actually pretty fun. Regular Gambit right now, it's just like, people just go to Gambit to complete bounties. Like, that's what people go into Gambit for. Nobody cares about Gambit. There's a few people, I'm not saying literally nobody, I'm just saying, like, generally speaking, that's the reason people go into Gambit, to do bounties. Crucible, I mean, it's fun by itself. You know, there's some fun to be had in Crucible. Look, I'm not saying Gambit can't be fun also. I'm just saying, like, the current design of Gambit is not an enjoyable experience. There's no competitive nature. I'm not saying Crucible's competitive or anything. I'm just saying, like, the design of Gambit is just filtered towards, like, this, like, non-communicating, like, you don't have to think sort of gameplay. It's like, oh, you know, they got the Primeval. And then the rank system for Gambit. They did say they're reworking this. They're looking into it. But from the first place, who thought of this was a good design? That you need like 14,000 points before you can reset it? And Crucible, you can just sit and, you know, match makes. And the games go by faster. You get mercy rolls. There's all these quality of life features that allow you to actually go through the games faster. Get a bunch of ranks fast. And then you have a vendor system with shacks. Gambit is just, it's dying. Someone stabbed it with a pitchfork and walked away. Alright, now I'll be moving into the story content. There's only 3 topics. Beyond Light Conclusion, Drifter and Aramis, Season of the Splicer. So I'm going to get right into that. Alright, so the Beyond Light Conclusion. What is it? What's going on with, like, Aramis is just kind of frozen there. Like, is Aramis dead? Is it like the speaker where he dies in like some cutscene, and the first time I saw that cutscene, I didn't even know he died, and some of you may not even know what I'm talking about because they removed Red War. But there's this cutscene where the speaker, he's in this like torture thing, and Gaul presses a button, he falls out of it. That's when he's dead. Like, I didn't get that. I just thought he like fell on the ground, but no, he's just dead. Okay, so is Aramis dead, or she's kind of just frozen there? You know, I go with the idea that if they're not showing them die on screen, they're probably not dead. I think that's a pretty good, like, assumption to make with films, so I think it's a pretty good assumption here. I'm still waiting for some sort of conclusion, like the stranger. Maybe when we get our last aspects and fragments and stuff, maybe there's going to be some conclusion next season. Like, maybe that's what next season is some conclusion to Beyond Light, but, like, personally, I feel like there's no conclusion, so that's basically my thoughts right now. I'm going to lead into the next topic, which is very similar. My prediction is that Drifter and Eris are going to be like the Stranger for their respective expansions. Eris for Witch Queen, Drifter for Lightfall, maybe. I don't really... Their involvement with Beyond Light was through a cinematic trailer, and they were at the camp for like a few missions. I don't get their involvement in the larger story at hand. I don't get the whole, like, Bungie's clearly setting up some sort of, like, dark Vanguard with the 3 of them. Like, Elsie's the Titan, I believe. Eris is a Hunter, and then Drifter would be, like, the Warlock. They don't really strictly fall into these. I think that those are their classes. Like I said, I'm not that big of a story guy, but, like, that's what I think they are. And Elsie, I think she's a Titan because she's from another timeline where her mark would be on her shoulder. That's because it looks like a mark that she has on her, like a Titan mark. I mean, those are my predictions. I think Drifter and Eris are going to be basically strangers for their respective DLCs or expansions. Season of the Splicer is good. Like, the story pacing, the storytelling, the characters, the environments. But it feels really out of place. Like, the city is just randomly in a Vex simulation. The whole Cadal allyship thing is never expanded upon. No mentions of it. Like, why didn't we use Keidal's army? Like, why didn't we talk to her and be like, hey, we could use some help, like, killing the Vex over here on Europa or whatever. It's like, this is going to benefit both of us, because if we can't fight, then, you know, we're not going to be able to fight the Witch Queen in this big grand war. Then she would have been like, you know, you're right, I'll send some supplies over. we get some like Cabal weaponry or something, or like it could literally just be a dialogue line during one of the expunge missions or something. Like, I don't know, it just feels like Bungie's trying really hard to do this like living world, but by denying the existence of the effects of the previous season that just happened, it really feels like they're not doing a good job with that. Like, it just feels like this weird thing that we like, oh, now we're allies with the Cabal Empire. It's like, what good is that if we can't utilize that allyship? Like, I get it, it's leading up to Witch Queen, I get it, you know, it's gonna be like 6 months before we utilize it, but maybe next season they'll touch on like Keitel and Mithrax or something like that. Like, I don't know. That's basically my thoughts on this. Well, thanks for watching and listening. I know this was probably pretty long, and I know I haven't uploaded in a while, but these are just these are things that I didn't really feel like I could make a big video on each of these individually. These are just kind of thoughts I've been having about Destiny that, like, you know, where's the game going? There's some problems. There's nothing major that's like, oh, the game's unplayable, but it's just more like these little things that build up over time. Thanks for watching. I would appreciate a like and a subscribe if you would like to do that. And as always, have a good day.